The first thing you need to understand about disrespect is that the moment someone insults you, provokes you, or deliberately tries to make you feel small, the real battle begins inside you. Most people think the battle is against the person standing in front of them. It isn't. The first battle is against your own reaction. Someone says something disrespectful, and immediately your heart starts racing. Your mind begins preparing a response. You want to prove them wrong. You want to make them regret what they said. You want to show them that they picked the wrong person. But stop for a moment. Ask yourself, why are you giving them so much power? Because the moment another person's words can instantly change your emotional state, they have already influenced you. They have reached inside your mind without permission and pushed a button. Powerful people understand this. They don't become powerful because nobody disrespects them. They become powerful because disrespect does not automatically control their behavior. They create a space between what happens to them and how they respond. That space is where their power lives. Someone may insult you, but you don't have to become insulting. Someone may raise their voice, but you don't have to raise yours. Or someone may try to embarrass you, but you don't have to desperately defend your reputation in front of everyone. You can pause, you can breathe, you can observe, and then you can decide. That pause may look insignificant to other people, but psychologically it is enormous. In that moment, you are refusing to hand over control of your behavior to another person. Think about how often people make mistakes because they react while angry. They send the message they should never have sent. They say something they cannot take back. They reveal information they should have kept private. They turn a small disagreement into a permanent conflict. And later, when the emotion disappears, they realize they allowed someone else's behavior to dictate their own. Don't make that mistake. Calmness does not mean weakness. In many situations, calmness is evidence of strength. A person who needs to immediately explode is often showing that their emotions are driving the vehicle. A person who can remain composed has something much more valuable: choice. You don't have to respond at the speed of your anger. You can respond at the speed of your wisdom. And this is where self-respect becomes different from ego. Ego says, "How dare they disrespect me? I need to prove myself." Self-respect says, "I know who I am. Now let me decide whether this situation deserves my energy." That difference can transform your life. Not every insult deserves a confrontation. Not every accusation deserves an explanation. Not every disrespectful person deserves access to your attention. Sometimes the strongest response is simply refusing to become the person they are trying to provoke. Because your peace is valuable, your attention is valuable, your emotional energy is valuable, and you should become selective about who gets access to all three. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become controlled. You can recognize disrespect without allowing it to dictate your identity. You can acknowledge someone's behavior without allowing their behavior to determine your worth. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, don't immediately ask, "What should I say?" Ask yourself something more powerful. Who do I want to be in this moment? Because when you control your response, you take back the power. And once you learn to control your emotional reaction, you begin to see another important truth. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn, because human beings naturally want to be understood. When someone misunderstands you, accuses you, criticizes you, or deliberately twists your intentions, your instinct may be to explain. You want to give them the full story. You want them to know what really happened. You want them to admit that they were wrong. But here's the problem. Not everyone who questions you is looking for the truth. Some people are looking for control. They don't want an explanation. They want a reaction. They want you to become defensive. They want you to spend your energy proving something to them, because as long as you're defending yourself, they have your attention. Powerful people recognize the difference. They understand that there is a major difference between being misunderstood accidentally and being misunderstood intentionally. If someone genuinely wants clarification, explain. If someone is confused and sincerely trying to understand you, communicate. But when a person has already decided to see you negatively, no amount of explanation may satisfy them. You could give them 10 reasons, and they will demand 11. You could answer every question, and they will create another accusation. You could prove one point, and they will immediately move to another. At some point, you have to recognize that the conversation is no longer about understanding. It has become a performance where you're constantly trying to prove your worth to someone who has no intention of acknowledging it. And that is where you need to step back. Your life becomes much more peaceful when you stop treating every opinion as a court case in which you must defend yourself. You don't have to convince everyone that you're a good person. You don't have to correct every rumor. You don't have to respond to every criticism. You don't have to chase people who have chosen to misunderstand you. There's tremendous freedom in knowing that your character does not require constant public defense. Think about the people you genuinely respect. They usually don't spend their entire lives announcing who they are. Their actions speak for them. Their consistency speaks for them. Their character becomes visible over time. And that is what you should build. Let your behavior become your explanation. If someone says you're unreliable, let your consistency answer. If someone says you lack discipline, let your work answer. If someone says you cannot succeed, let your results answer. You don't always need words when your life is providing evidence. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or refusing accountability. A strong person can admit a mistake. In fact, being able to say, "I was wrong," is one of the clearest signs of inner strength. But there is a difference between accepting legitimate criticism and desperately defending yourself against someone committed to attacking you. Learn that difference, because every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause and ask, does this person actually want understanding, or do they simply want access to my energy? That question can save you from countless unnecessary arguments. Your worth does not increase because someone finally understands it, and your worth does not decrease because someone refuses to see it. Let people talk. Let people misunderstand. Let people form opinions. You have a life to build that is far more important than winning every argument. You don't need to prove yourself to everyone. You need to remain true to yourself. And once you stop wasting your energy trying to explain yourself to people who have already chosen not to understand you, you discover something even more important. Respect is protected through boundaries. A boundary is not an angry speech. It is not a threat. It is not an attempt to control another person's behavior. A boundary is a decision about what you will accept and what you will do when that line is crossed. This distinction matters because many people say they have boundaries, but what they actually have are requests. They say, "Please don't talk to me like that." And the other person does it again. "Please don't disrespect me." They do it again. "Please stop treating me this way." Again, nothing changes. At some point, your words lose meaning if your actions never follow them. Powerful people understand that a boundary becomes real when there is a consequence attached to it. If someone repeatedly speaks to you disrespectfully, you don't have to scream louder. You don't have to insult them back. You don't have to threaten them with dramatic statements. You simply change your level of access. Maybe you end the conversation. Maybe you leave the room. Maybe you stop sharing personal information. Maybe you distance yourself from the relationship. Maybe you stop making yourself available to someone who repeatedly demonstrates that they don't value your presence. The important thing is that you don't announce every move. You simply act. This is where many people struggle because they confuse boundaries with punishment. Punishment says, "I'm going to hurt you because you hurt me." A boundary says, "Because this behavior is unacceptable to me, I am choosing not to participate in it." One is driven by revenge. The other is driven by self-respect. And once you understand that difference, you stop feeling guilty for protecting yourself. You realize that saying no does not make you cruel. Leaving an unhealthy conversation does not make you weak. Creating distance does not automatically make you arrogant. Sometimes walking away is simply the most mature response available. But there is another important lesson here. Don't establish boundaries you are unwilling to enforce. If you tell someone that you will leave a conversation when they become verbally abusive, then leave when it happens. If you tell someone you will no longer tolerate being repeatedly canceled on, then stop making yourself constantly available. If you tell someone you won't participate in disrespectful arguments, don't stay there for 2 hours trying to win one. Your consistency teaches people how seriously they should take your words. And notice something else. You don't need everyone to agree with your boundaries. They may call you selfish. They may say you've changed. They may accuse you of being difficult. They may even become angry because they no longer have the same access to you. Let them. A boundary was never designed to make everyone comfortable. It was designed to make your standards clear. Of course, this doesn't mean becoming suspicious of everyone or cutting people off at the smallest mistake. Mature boundaries allow room for communication, mistakes, apologies, and genuine change. The key is repetition. Everyone can make a mistake, but repeated disrespect is information. Pay attention to patterns, not promises. When someone repeatedly shows you that they don't respect your time, your words, your limits, or your dignity, believe the pattern. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to destroy them. You simply have to stop giving unlimited access to someone who repeatedly abuses that access. Because real self-respect is not demanding that everyone treat you well. It is refusing to remain where disrespect has become the standard. Set the boundary, enforce it calmly, and let your actions speak. And when you learn to set boundaries without anger, without begging, and without constantly explaining yourself, you begin to discover another powerful weapon that most people underestimate: silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. The silence of someone who has decided that not every situation deserves their energy. There are moments in life when speaking is necessary. You need to communicate. You need to defend yourself when it truly matters. You need to confront serious problems. But there are also moments when every additional word makes the situation worse. Someone provokes you and you immediately want to respond. They make a sarcastic comment. You want to answer. They question your character. You want to defend yourself. They try to embarrass you in front of others. You want to embarrass them back. But what happens when you refuse to take the bait? The entire dynamic changes. A person trying to provoke you expects a reaction. They are waiting for emotion because your emotion gives them something to work with. Once you become angry, they can push further. Once you start explaining, they can challenge every explanation. Once you begin arguing, they can turn the conversation into a battle that never ends. Silence interrupts that pattern. It creates uncertainty. It removes the emotional reward, and most importantly, it gives you time to think. This is why powerful people don't feel obligated to answer immediately. They understand that an immediate response is not always an intelligent response. Sometimes the smartest thing you can say is nothing, not because you're afraid, because you are observing. You are watching what the other person does when you don't react. You are learning whether their behavior was accidental, emotional, manipulative, or deliberate. And observation gives you information that anger usually hides. Think about how many conflicts would disappear if people simply waited before responding. A message arrives that makes you angry. Instead of immediately replying, you put the phone down. Someone insults you. Instead of matching their energy, you remain calm. Someone tries to pull you into gossip. Instead of participating, you say nothing and change the subject. Someone wants you to prove yourself. You refuse to enter the competition. That is not weakness, that is emotional discipline. But understand this: strategic silence does not mean tolerating abuse or ignoring serious problems. There are situations where you must speak clearly and protect yourself. Silence should never become an excuse for accepting mistreatment. The point is choice. You choose when to speak. You choose when to remain silent. You choose when the conversation deserves your attention. And that choice is power. The person who reacts to everything becomes predictable. Anyone can push their buttons because the buttons are obvious. But when you become calm and deliberate, people can no longer easily manipulate your behavior. They don't know whether you're angry. They don't know whether you're offended. They don't know whether you're going to respond or simply walk away. And you don't need to make them know. Your goal isn't to intimidate people. Your goal is to remain in control of yourself. There is something deeply powerful about being comfortable with silence. You no longer feel the pressure to fill every uncomfortable moment with words. You no longer feel responsible for correcting every opinion. You no longer feel compelled to win every argument. You become comfortable letting time reveal what words cannot. And sometimes, after the noise disappears, the truth becomes obvious. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Sometimes your silence is the clearest sign that you are no longer available for manipulation. And once you understand the power of silence, you begin to recognize another important truth. There is a difference between revenge and consequences. When someone disrespects you, the natural impulse can be to make them feel what you felt. You want them to suffer. You want them to regret their actions. Or you want to prove that they made a mistake by crossing you, but revenge keeps you connected to the person who hurt you. You may think you're moving against them, but emotionally you're still reacting to them. They're still occupying your thoughts. You're still allowing their behavior to determine your actions. That isn't freedom. Real strength is different. Real strength says, I don't need to destroy you. I simply need to decide what access you have to me. That is where consequences become powerful. A consequence is not about hurting someone because they hurt you. It is about allowing behavior to produce a natural result. If someone repeatedly disrespects your time, they may lose access to your time. If someone repeatedly breaks your trust, they may lose access to your private life. If someone repeatedly turns every conversation into an attack, they may lose access to your conversations. If someone constantly takes advantage of your kindness, your availability may change. You don't have to announce these consequences with anger. You simply adjust your behavior. And this is where many people make a mistake. They keep giving chances without changing anything. They forgive the same behavior repeatedly, but they never change the conditions that allow the behavior to continue. Forgiveness can be powerful, but forgiveness does not require unlimited access. You can forgive someone and still maintain distance. You can release resentment and still remember the lesson. You can wish someone well and still decide that they no longer belong in the same position in your life. That is maturity, because the purpose of a consequence is not to create fear. It is to create clarity. Your actions communicate what your words sometimes cannot. When you repeatedly tolerate something, people may assume it is acceptable. When you calmly change your response, the message becomes clear. This is why consistency matters. If you threaten to walk away every time you're angry, but never actually do it, your threats eventually become meaningless. But when your boundaries are calm, consistent, and predictable, people learn that your standards are real. And notice the difference between power and revenge. Revenge asks, how can I hurt them? Power asks, what should I change? Revenge keeps your attention on the other person. Power brings your attention back to yourself. That shift changes everything. Instead of spending hours planning how to get even, you start asking better questions. What did this situation teach me? What pattern did I ignore? What boundary should have existed earlier? What behavior will I no longer tolerate? What kind of people deserve greater access to my life? These questions turn pain into wisdom, and sometimes the greatest consequence you can give someone is simply losing your presence. No dramatic announcement, no public humiliation, no revenge campaign, no endless argument. You simply stop participating in the pattern. You become less available to chaos. You become more protective of your time. You become selective about trust, and you continue building your life. That last part matters most. Don't make your life about proving someone wrong. Build a life that makes their opinion irrelevant. Let your growth be greater than your anger. Let your discipline be stronger than your desire for revenge. Let your future become more important than what happened in your past. Because the strongest response to disrespect isn't revenge. It's becoming so disciplined, so peaceful, and so focused that you no longer need to get even. And when you stop seeking revenge, stop chasing explanations, and stop giving unlimited access to people who repeatedly disrespect you, something begins to change inside you. You become less dependent on other people's approval, and that may be the deepest form of power there is. Because ultimately, the goal isn't to become someone who can intimidate others. The goal is to become someone who cannot easily be emotionally controlled by them. Think about how much of your life can be influenced by the opinions of other people. Someone praises you, and suddenly you feel valuable. Someone criticizes you, and suddenly you question yourself. Someone accepts you, and you feel confident. Someone rejects you, and you begin wondering whether something is wrong with you. That is a dangerous way to live. If your sense of worth rises and falls according to the opinions of other people, then you have given them authority over your emotional life, and you don't need to live that way. Your value cannot depend on whether everyone understands you. It cannot depend on whether everyone likes you. It cannot depend on whether everyone approves of your decisions. You need something deeper. You need an internal standard. That standard comes from knowing your character, knowing your values, knowing what you are working toward, and knowing the kind of person you are committed to becoming. When you have that foundation, criticism becomes information rather than identity. Someone can tell you that you failed, and you can ask, "Is there something I can learn from this?" Someone can tell you that you made a mistake, and you can say, "Maybe they're right. I'll correct it." But you don't have to conclude, "I am worthless." That's the difference between confidence and ego. Ego cannot tolerate being wrong. Confidence can. Ego needs applause. Confidence can continue working in silence. Ego constantly asks, "What do people think about me?" Confidence asks, "Am I becoming the person I want to be?" That question changes the direction of your life. Because once your attention moves from approval to growth, disrespect loses much of its power. You don't have to prove yourself to every critic. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to convince every person that you're valuable. You simply keep building. Build your discipline, build your knowledge, build your character, build your relationships with people who genuinely respect you. Build a life that reflects your values. And understand something important: becoming strong does not mean becoming emotionally numb. You can still feel hurt. You can still feel disappointed. You can still become angry. Strength doesn't mean you never experience emotions. Strength means emotions don't automatically become your decisions. You feel the emotion, you acknowledge it, and then you choose what happens next. That is maturity. There will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be people who underestimate you. There will always be people who project their own insecurities onto you. You cannot control all of that, but you can control whether you allow their behavior to change who you are. And perhaps that is the ultimate lesson in handling disrespect. Don't let another person's lack of character become an excuse for you to abandon your own. If they become cruel, you don't have to become cruel. If they become dishonest, you don't have to become dishonest. If they become disrespectful, you don't have to lose your dignity trying to defeat them. Remain yourself. Protect your boundaries. Choose your battles. Walk away when necessary, and keep moving toward the life you are building. Because eventually you realize that the greatest victory isn't making someone regret disrespecting you. The greatest victory is reaching a point where disrespect can no longer define you.